A simple flight boarding takes a dark turn when a black man becomes the target of casual racism. The tension rises as the confrontation escalates, with passengers watching. But no one expects what happens when he reaches into his wallet. Is he even in the right boarding group? The woman's voice cut through the soft airport, buzzed like a shard of glass. Row 6 hadn't even started boarding yet, but her eyes were already locked on the tall black man standing quietly by the gate, holding nothing but a slim leather wallet and a folded coat. It was 6:22 p.m. at gate B14 in Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson. The destination, Washington, D.C. Rain misted the windows, leaving cold tracks like fingerprints on glass. Passengers stood with slouched spines, scrolling aimlessly, sipping $7 coffees, just trying to get home. But now eyes were shifting. Woman-mid-50s, designer trench, gold Cartier bracelet that caught the gate lights every time she gestured, turned to the gate agent. He's not even in line. Shouldn't someone check? She added, voice coded in concern too rehearsed to be real. The man, in his late 30s, kept his stance. No reaction. His jaw was still. Coat draped neatly over one arm, wallet still closed. His skin caught the overhead fluorescence with an even glow, dignified and sharp. Not a single word left his lips. I'm sure he's in the right group, ma'am, the gate agent replied cautiously. But how would you know that? She pressed, stepping forward. That's when the small things started shifting. A sigh from a businessman 2 rows back. A subtle head shake from a flight attendant behind the counter. But no one moved. The woman turned to a security officer posted near the gate. Excuse me? Can you just double-check this man's boarding group? Still. The man said nothing. The officer walked over, glancing between the man and the woman. Sir, do you have your boarding pass? He opened his wallet slowly, calmly, pulled out a dark blue pass, flicked it up with 2 fingers like a playing card. It said, Group 1, Priority Boarding. Oh, the woman muttered, lips curling. Well, that's odd. But he wasn't. He flipped the wallet open just 1 more inch. The flash of gold was unmistakable. Not a credit card. Not a frequent flyer badge. Not a driver's license. It was a badge. Federal, embossed, lined with the letters in all caps. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Silence dropped like a curtain. The officer blinked. Sir, you're good to board any time. Sorry for the man finally spoke. Just 4 words. Smooth, level, untouched by anger. I get that often. Then he nodded to the gate agent and walked toward the jet bridge without looking back. The woman froze. Eyes wide. No comeback. Her lips twitched for a moment, some cocktail of embarrassment and disbelief swirling behind them, but nothing came. Out. Someone clapped once, then twice, a few chuckles. Someone muttered, serves her right. By the time she boarded, every step she took felt loud. Her head stayed down. No one offered to help her with her bag. Meanwhile, in C3, agent Michael Langston adjusted his seatbelt, pulled out a novel, and let the sound of silence do what it always did best. Speak for him. 30-5,000 feet in the air, the turbulence hit, soft and rhythmic like a reminder. But Michael Langston didn't flinch. He'd been through worse. C3A. First class, window seat, smooth leather. A silent cabin around him, with the woman who'd tried to humiliate him now seated in 3D just across the aisle. She hadn't looked at him since boarding. She hadn't spoken a word. But she'd definitely seen the badge. A flight attendant came by with a soft voice and cautious smile. Anything to drink, sir? Ginger ale, no ice. She nodded respectfully. And didn't ask anything more. She didn't need to. Word had spread. His presence alone had altered the atmosphere. As he sipped quietly, Michael glanced out the window at the clouds, his mind drifting not forward, but back. Back to a living room in Alabama. 1997. Mama, I want to wear my Batman shirt to school. Not. Today, baby, his mother said, smoothing his collar with calloused fingers. You got a presentation today. Gotta look like you already own the room. He didn't understand at the time. He was only 10. But that morning, she made him rehearse his science fair pitch 7 times until it was crisp, unshuckable, and louder than any whisper in the room. He'd won. But he remembered the way the principal handed the ribbon to the white student beside him until a teacher corrected her. The mistake was brushed off, but his mother's silence afterward lasted the whole ride home. Remember this, she finally said at the stoplight, tears never quite falling. You don't get to just be brilliant. You gotta be undeniable. Michael. Never forgot that. 2009. Quantico, Virginia. He'd walked into the FBI's training facility with nothing but a degree in criminology and a resume, full of red lines that didn't match his skin tone. Others got buddy-buddy with the instructors. He kept his head down and hit every mark. Shooting range? Top 3%. Tactical scenarios? Unmatched calm? Written exams? Flawless. But it wasn't until the hostage simulation that people really noticed. While others barked orders and fumbled, he spoke softly, strategically. He walked out of the fake crisis with every civilian safe and even the hostage taker, asking to speak with him alone. He doesn't panic, they said. He's surgical. He's intimidating. But polite. The instructors said it like they weren't sure if that was a compliment or a warning. He'd graduated second in the class. The one who beat him, his current supervisor and close friend Daniel Ruiz. Present. Back on the plane, Michael glanced toward the 3D seat again. The woman now known to him as Mrs. Karen Whitford, he'd caught her name as she spoke far too loudly to the flight attendant earlier, was still fidgeting. Legs crossed and uncrossed. She hadn't touched her wine. Hadn't opened her book. And every few minutes, she peeked sideways. Just long enough to confirm he was still there, but Michael didn't engage. He didn't need to, because the power shift had already happened, and she knew it. It wasn't in the badge. It was in how he didn't have to do anything with it. His presence, his silence, his lack of need for confrontation, that's what unsettled her. People like her weren't afraid of anger. They were used to it, but they never knew what to do with quiet strength. With calm that didn't crack, a flight attendant returned. Sir, we've been informed that the gate agent filed an incident report. If you'd like to add anything when we land. No need, he said gently. Let it be. You sure? I'm used to turbulence. The attendant gave a soft smile. Still. I'm sorry that happened, Agent Langston. He nodded, and for the first time in the flight, a small smile touched his lips. He'd been underestimated his entire life, but the higher he rose, the less he needed to prove anything to anyone. He didn't need a confrontation. He was the consequence. Row 18 was buzzing. You saw it, right? The badge? Full-on FBI. That lady went white. I swear I thought he was just, another businessman. The whispers bounced like echoes through the cabin, low enough not to be overheard by crew, but loud enough to carry among strangers. Some were amused, some were admiring. A few? Skeptical. In first class, the quiet was thicker. Measured. Mrs. Whitford hadn't moved. Her shoulders were locked in place like a mannequin left in the wrong store window. Across the aisle, Langston kept reading, back straight. Coat still folded precisely across his lap. He hadn't said another word, but the silence worked harder than any speech. Midway through the flight, a young black flight attendant passed through. The curtain from the coach, her badge reading Tasha. She paused at his seat, eyes flicking to the gold trim of his lapel. I just wanted to say, thank you, sir, for the way you handled that. Langston nodded once. Appreciate you. Tasha's expression shifted somewhere between admiration and sorrow. Most wouldn't have stayed that calm. Langston just said, most shouldn't have to. She left, biting her lip. And then it happened. A subtle moment. Quick, but it stayed. A man in row 2, mid-40s, gray suit, expensive tie stood up to stretch. As he turned, he glanced at Langston. Their eyes locked for half a second. The man smiled tightly and gave a nod, but it wasn't the nod of respect. It was the nod of evaluation. The kind that said, how did someone like you get here? Langston returned. No gesture. He just blinked slow and unbothered. The man sat down without stretching. Tasha passed again, slower this time, placing an extra snack on Langston's tray without a word. He met her eyes, and they both understood. There were always two kinds of reactions to black excellence in white-dominated spaces. One whispered, finally. The other whispered, how dare you? Across the cabin, in row 6, a teenage girl tapped her father on the arm. Dad, did you see what happened before we boarded? He looked up from his phone. Something about a woman complaining? She thought that guy didn't belong in Group 1. He showed her an FBI badge. The man frowned. Really? Huh. Well, people are too sensitive these days. You never know who's legit. The girl paused. She just assumed. He didn't do anything, maybe. Or maybe he made her uncomfortable. Doesn't mean it's racist. The girl looked back at Langston, and her face said what she didn't voice. But it was. Even when the facts were in plain view, some people chose to see fog. As the seatbelt light flicked on for descent, Langston gently tucked away his book and reclined just slightly. But he didn't close his eyes, because he felt it every glance, every whisper, every shift in energy. He had long ago learned to read a room with military precision. Someone had posted about it already. He could feel that too. A tweet. A blurry picture. Captioned, lady tried to kick a black guy off the flight. Turns out he's FBI. We ain't the same. It would spread. But none of that mattered to him. What mattered was the symbolic moment that had passed in silence just an hour ago. The nod. That. One man's nod was more than posture. It was permission disguised as politeness. A quiet assertion of control. A question that didn't need asking. What's your clearance level? Really? Do you belong? Langston didn't answer it then. He never would. Because in rooms like this, at 35,000 feet or 3 stories up in D.C. boardrooms, his presence was the answer. No explanation. No debate. Just quiet, uninterrupted existence. And that, more than anything, made them uncomfortable. The wheels touched down in Washington, D.C. with a soft thud. A collective shuffle began. Seatbelts unclicked, coats pulled from overhead bins, phones turned back on. But even in that mundane chaos, people still glanced at him. Langston waited. He always did. Let the eager ones climb over each other first. Let the whispers pass down the jet bridge like static. By the time he stepped into the terminal, the quiet followed him like a cloak. His phone buzzed the moment he cleared the gate. Sender. Ruiz. Subject. Heads up text. Someone at Delta Corporate. Forwarded an incident summary to the Bureau. Said you may have been disruptive during boarding. You good? Langston exhaled once. Not surprised. Not shaken. Just tired. He typed back. Handled. Filing nothing. Another buzz came before he could pocket the phone. Sender. Internal Affairs Liaison Agent Ellis. Subject. Request for clarification. Langston didn't even open it yet. They always used the word clarification when they meant justification. Wanted to know, did he raise his voice? Did he say something off protocol? Did he embarrass the Bureau? What they never asked was, did someone embarrass him? At the Hoover Building, Langston walked through the security gates without needing to. Flash his badge again. Everyone knew him here. Still, eyes lingered. He stepped into his office corner window. Organized desk, 2 neatly stacked case files waiting. The silence felt heavier than usual. Minutes later, a knock. Daniel Ruiz, mid-40s, Cuban-American, glasses, always halfway down his nose, leaned in. I had to ask, he said softly. You know how it goes. Langston just gestured toward the second chair. Sit or stand awkwardly. Your call. Ruiz chuckled but didn't smile. Corporate's not dropping it. Someone's pressing it from the passenger side. They said, you flashed your badge aggressively. Langston didn't even look up from his file. I opened my wallet. They're trying to frame it as an intimidation tactic. She asked security to verify if I was supposed to be boarding. Ruiz sighed. I know. You're not the one on trial here, but I always am, Langston finished for him. A pause. Ruiz leaned forward, lowering his voice. You want me to push back? Langston finally looked up, calm, centered. Double quotes, no. Let them push. I'll respond with something better. He opened his desk drawer and slid a file across. Joint task up, he said. Cartel laundering network, Northern Virginia. Been tracing them for weeks. Surveillance lined up. Ready to. Close. Ruiz opened the file, eyebrows rising with every page turn. This is airtight, he muttered. Langston nodded. Want to make the noise go away? Results always speak louder. Ruiz sat back. This'll bury the nonsense in one cycle. Langston said nothing more. He didn't need an apology from Delta. He didn't need a headline. He needed wins, because power didn't come from proving you were right. It came from being too precise to argue with. Later that evening, he stepped into the bullpen briefing room. 30 agents, 4 analysts. A flat digital display with their newest target's face. Langston took the front, not with bluster, not with announcements. He simply clicked the remote. A map popped up. Pins, zones, color-coded trails. Drop sites. Tuesdays. Fronts pretending to be clinics. They've laundered more than 4 million. In the last 6 months, we will take it down tomorrow. Someone in the back whispered, how'd he even find this? Ruiz, from the side, answered calmly. He reads things the rest of us walk past. No applause. No praise. Just a quiet shift in respect. As agents moved to prep, one rookie paused by Langston on the way out. Sir? I heard what happened on the flight. Just wanted to say it meant a lot. Langston looked at him. How old are you? 23. Then don't let that be your ceiling, Langston said. Let it be your start. The young agent nodded and left. Langston sat in the empty room a moment longer, staring at the fading glow of the projector. People could doubt his presence. They could question his tone, his stance, even his silence. But they couldn't argue with what he delivered. He didn't chase vindication. He became. At 4:58 a.m. Northern Virginia, unmarked vans rolled out of the Bureau's underground garage in staggered silence. Radios clicked softly. Every agent inside wore the same expression, clear-eyed, alert, ready. But only one of them, Agent Michael Langston, carried that specific kind of calm, the kind earned, not taught. He reviewed the plan one last time as Ruiz drove. Targets 1 through 5 will be inside the drop front by 5:20, Ruiz said. Intel says their guy checks the cash register for dummy bills first. Are you sure this timing works? Langston didn't look up from his tablet. He's habit-driven. We confirmed his pattern 5 times. Ruiz nodded. Still impressive. Most people would have stormed the place last week. Langston's voice was smooth. Most people rush because they don't want to be questioned. The van slowed at 5:14 a.m. Agents surrounded the small two-story building posing as a homeopathic clinic. It had been laundering cartel money for months. 3 lookouts in plain clothes posted nearby. Cameras rigged to look like security, but really just watched who came and went. Langston stepped out last. No vest. No rifle. Just an earpiece, data tablet, and the kind of gaze that made people straighten their posture without realizing. Teams Alpha and Bravo positions, he said softly into the click double quotes Charlie, back entrance. Wait for visual cue. Click. Moved with precision, standing just out of view, adjusting nothing, saying little. Even Ruiz didn't speak. At 5:21, the front man arrived. White SUV parked. Stepped out with a duffel bag slung casually over his shoulder. Langston tapped once on the tablet. 3 flashes from a reflective panel across the street. The signal. Every team moved like gears in a silent machine. No yelling. No chaos. 7 minutes later, 5 suspects were cuffed. The office was cleared. $2.3 million in fake patient payments documented, and the network that had run untouched for 14 months collapsed in silence. Ruiz stood by the SUV, smirking. That's how it's done. Langston just nodded. By noon, word had spread through the bureau. A quiet buzz followed him as he returned to headquarters. Analysts were already scrubbing the suspects' encrypted phones. Supervisors were already prepping the press statement. But everyone knew who had made it possible. Langston didn't need the spotlight. He was the light. By mid-afternoon, a senior official stopped him in the hallway. "Agent Langston," she said, adjusting her blazer. "That was surgical this morning. Even the DC field noticed." He nodded politely. "Thank you. You know, we're reviewing candidates for assistant section chief next quarter." He raised an eyebrow slightly. "Didn't realize I was." "In consideration, you weren't, but now you are." She walked off before he could respond. He didn't chase titles. They came to him eventually. Not because people liked him, but because his performance left no other option. Later that day, as the operation's final report was filed, Ruiz pulled him aside. "Hey," he said, "they're still poking around that flight incident. Legal wants to ensure bureau image wasn't affected. You want me to handle it?" Langston looked out the window for a moment, watching the people on the street below. Then back to Ruiz. "No, let them finish their calls. You sure?" Langston smiled faintly. "They'll stop once they realize the image they're trying to protect is me." That night, a junior agent posted a single photo on the bureau's private group board. Langston standing on the sidewalk outside the clinic post-raid. Jacket unzipped, sun rising behind him like a halo. No bad showing, no gun drawn. Caption, "Not loud, just lethal." It went viral within 12 hours. By morning, even senior brass had seen it. Some hated it, others printed it, but no one could deny what it meant. Langston wasn't just solving cases. He was rewriting the definition of strength. The conference room on the 7th floor was built to intimidate. Polished mahogany, frosted glass. A single American flag in the corner, perfectly upright. The walls bore framed commendations, presidents, directors, faded signatures from decades past. Power lingered here like humidity. Langston entered on time, alone. 3 others waited, a woman from legal affairs, a bureau image consultant, and Deputy Assistant Director Glenn McCleary, gray-haired, suit too tight, handshake always cold. Langston didn't sit until they asked. "Agent Langston," McCleary began, "thank you for making time. This will be quick." Langston raised an eyebrow. "It's your clock." The image consultant, a sharp-eyed man with a PR background and a folder full of screen grabs, slid one across the table. It was a still frame from airport security footage. Langston, mid-motion, flashing his badge. "We're concerned about perception," the man said. "The woman on that flight filed a formal complaint." Langston said nothing. McCleary cleared his throat. "She claimed she felt visibly threatened. When you displayed a government badge in a hostile manner, her husband is an aviation lobbyist, and she has connections with media, and she's not the one under scrutiny for racial profiling?" Langston asked, voice level. Legal Affairs interjected. "Michael, our concern is about escalation optics. You know how fragile things can be post-incident." "I said 4 words," Langston replied, and walked away. The room fell still. Langston reached into his briefcase and removed a neatly printed folder. He placed it on the table, centered, then slid it forward. Flight 2237 Incident Summary. The TSA reviewed the footage. The gate agent filed a witness report backing my account. The woman in question was heard saying, "Is he even supposed to be in Group 1? That's not a question about boarding. That's a question about presence." He locked eyes with McCleary, and I answered her question. No one moved. The PR man swallowed. Still, the visual of a badge can be loaded. Langston leaned forward, not raising his voice. "Do you advise white agents to hide theirs when passengers are rude? Or do we only question it when someone like me wears the badge that reminds people who really represents the law?" McCleary's jaw shifted slightly. "Michael, no," Langston said. "Let me be clear. I didn't escalate anything. I de-escalated her assumption. With silence. With professionalism. And with a badge I've spent 15 years earning." Legal opened her mouth, then closed it again. Langston continued. "I've served without scandal, closed cases that saved lives, mentored agents who now lead divisions. But you want me here to answer for making someone uncomfortable?" A pause, sharp, heavy. Langston stood. "If you want to reprimand me, do it. If you want to leak to the press that an FBI agent showed his credentials to stop a public embarrassment, do it." He stepped back from the chair. "But don't ever ask me to apologize for my presence again." He turned toward the door. McCleary's voice came low. "Michael." Langston paused, hand on the doorknob. McCleary didn't meet his eyes. "Just said, you're dismissed. No further review." Langston didn't smile. He didn't need to, because truth doesn't need applause. It just needs a witness. As he left the room, the image consultant whispered to Legal. He didn't even flinch. Legal nodded slowly, because he knew he didn't have to. That evening, in the elevator back to his floor, Langston stood beside a junior black analyst. She was quiet, holding a stack of files. She looked like she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. He nodded once. "You're not alone." She blinked, swallowed, and nodded back. He stepped out without waiting for thanks. Because sometimes the loudest confrontation wasn't a shouting match. It was a refusal to shrink. The briefing room smelled like fresh coffee, aging carpet, and nerves. Cameras hummed low. Journalists murmured behind glowing phones. Langston adjusted his tie once, checked the mic levels, and waited beside the podium. Behind him, a monitor displayed the headline in clean, bold font. FBI confirms multi-million dollar money laundering bust operation led by Agent Michael Langston. It was supposed to be routine, quick facts. No drama. Say the mission succeeded, avoid politics, and leave. But that's not how it played out. He stepped up to the podium. Good posture. Calm cadence. No theatrics. At approximately 5:21 a.m. yesterday, multiple bureau teams executed a synchronized takedown of 5 cartel-linked fronts operating in Northern Virginia. No shots were fired. 7 arrests were made. 2 children at one location were placed into protective care. All based on intelligence built over 8 weeks without leaks. Flashes. Blinked. Fingers typed. Langston continued, I'm proud of this team. I'm proud of the agents who worked in silence and precision to protect this country's streets and its people. He looked up, and I'm proud to do it wearing this badge. The last line wasn't scripted. It wasn't in the Bureau-approved talking points, but it hit hard. A hand shot up. Jessica Fields, national correspondent for a major news outlet. Blazer, pin straight posture, calculated. Agent Langston, if I may. There's a rumor trending regarding an incident on Flight 2237 earlier this week. Some say you used your badge to intimidate a passenger. Would you care to comment? The room held its breath. Langston didn't blink. He leaned slightly toward the mic. I didn't use my badge to intimidate anyone. A pause. I used my silence to remind them that I didn't need to. Murmurs. A few quiet chuckles. But respectful. Jessica opened her mouth again, but Langston raised one hand just enough. I boarded a plane, said nothing, and was questioned simply for being in the room. I did not argue. I did not retaliate. I let the facts speak. I showed my boarding pass. And yes, I showed my credentials. Another pause. Because sometimes the only way to end the question of whether you belong is to show that you already do. That silence again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of understanding. Full of weight. Jessica lowered her hand. Langston straightened. If there are no further questions about the operation, I'll yield the podium. No one moved. No more hands. As he stepped down, a reporter whispered near the front. That wasn't a statement. That was a scalpel. Within an hour, clips hit social media. Within 5, they were everywhere. I didn't use my badge to intimidate. I used my silence to remind them I didn't need to. The quote spread like fire across platforms, Instagram captions, TikTok stitches, Twitter debates. Some turned it into posters. Others turned it into lesson plans. Langston turned it into nothing. He went home, made black coffee, sat on his couch, didn't even turn on the TV, but his inbox did. By morning, there were over 3,000 emails, messages from school teachers, young black officers, even CEOs. Thank you for holding the line. My son watched that clip. He rewound it 3 times. You stood there and you didn't flinch. Neither will I. And somewhere, in that quiet between the digital applause and the fading press lights, Langston felt something deeper than pride. He felt clarity. Because his win hadn't come from proving himself. It came from refusing to be erased. And now, the world was finally listening. 2 weeks passed. The Bureau's marble halls looked the same. The fluorescent lights still buzzed faintly. Briefing rooms still held too much coffee and too little sunlight. But something had shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't official. But Langston could feel it. It began with small things. The training room in Wing C, once named after a long-retired Whitefield agent, was quietly renamed Langston Tactical Prep Room. He didn't ask for it. No ceremony, no plaque unveiling. Just a quiet email from facilities. Sir, hope this is all right. The rookies requested it. Unanimous. Then came the mentorship program. An intern, Jamal, 19, awkward and wide-eyed, had seen the press. Briefing clip and emailed Langston directly. Subject: Sir, I didn't know someone like me could sound like that in a room full of power. Can you teach me? Langston replied with 3 words. Come in tomorrow. Now Jamal shadowed him twice. A week. No press. No meetings. Just quiet walks through case files, calm lessons on voice control, posture, the art of saying more with less. Then the shift when hired. Director Grayson, a man known for political neutrality and endless policy memos, pulled Langston into his office unexpectedly. Agent Langston, he said. I watched the flight clip and the press one. Both. Langston didn't speak. Just wait. The director continued. You didn't break protocol. But more than that, you clarified something we've ignored. Langston tilted his head slightly. Grayson held up his phone. Our badge doesn't mean power. It means promise. And you reminded people of that. A pause. Grayson added, effective immediately. We're implementing an internal bias recognition seminar mandatory, all levels. I want you to review the materials before launch. Langston didn't smile, but he nodded because for the first time, change wasn't being asked of him. It was inspired by him. Downstairs, new agents started walking taller. Not louder taller. You could tell who had watched the video by how they greeted him. Not with jokes. Not with casual, "Hey, Langston. Now it was morning, sir," or "Appreciate you, agent," or the simple, steady nod of acknowledgement. From agents who had never made eye contact before. One morning, Ruiz met him in the hallway, holding 2 coffees. "Got the usual," Ruiz said. Langston took it, eyebrow raised. "Since when do you deliver?" Ruiz chuckled. "Since half the bureau started acting like you walk on water." Langston took a slow sip. "Tell them I still pay taxes, and I'm allergic to cinnamon." Ruiz leaned against the wall. "Seriously, you feel it, right?" Langston didn't answer. Just glanced at the wall beside them. A bulletin board tacked at the top. A quote in bold print over a still image from the press room. "Sometimes, the only way to end the question of whether you belong is to show that you already do." Below it were handwritten notes from agents and analysts. Some anonymous, some signed. I needed to hear that. "Thank you for reminding me I'm not alone. One day I'll say it like you did." Langston stared at the board for a long moment. He didn't speak, because some legacies aren't written with speeches. They're written in the quiet shift of how people show up the next day, and how they hold themselves, in the room that used to shrink them, and now stands just a little taller. And as he turned to leave, Ruiz said one last thing barely above a whisper, "About damn time they started listening." Langston didn't turn, but a corner of his mouth lifted just enough. The headline hit like a slap. FBI agent accused of weaponizing race in public confrontation, internal complaint filed. It ran everywhere. Cable news panels, social media scrolls, comment sections dripping with venom. And Langston's inbox, once full of thank yous, turned into a storm of concerns. He didn't flinch publicly, but inside something cracked. The complaint, unsigned, had been filed quietly by a senior agent, accusing him of performative conduct and intimidating public display of rank based on racial perception. The words weren't just petty, they were surgical, designed to reframe his calm as manipulation. His badge as a threat. His very existence as disruption. At the morning briefing, no one brought it up. But the silence was louder than usual. Ruiz stepped into his office later. "You know, it's a smear. Somebody's pissed you're being considered for section chief." Langston didn't look up. "It's not about the job. It's about the shift." Ruiz nodded slowly. "You shook the building without shouting. That scares them more than protests ever did." Langston finally met his gaze. "They want me to crack, to respond emotionally, to prove them right. Then don't." He didn't, but that night, alone in his apartment, he almost did. He stood in front of his mirror, badge in one hand, the complaint printed in the other. And for the first time in a long time, the weight felt personal, not professional, not tactical. Just tired. Tired of being a walking contradiction to their comfort. Tired of having to be flawless to be called measured. He closed his eyes, took a breath. Then he remembered something. His mother's voice on a night when he was 13, crying after a teacher accused him of plagiarizing a paper he'd written alone. "You don't let them decide how much space you take up," she'd whispered, wiping his face with a towel. "You decide, you. every room, every step. The next morning, Langston didn't respond to the press. He responded with a briefing memo. Detailed breakdown of a major corruption link between the cartel and a private security contractor. Evidence that would take weeks to dismantle. He had already mapped out the flow. It landed on the director's desk like thunder. That afternoon, Director Grayson called him in. "I've seen the complaint," Grayson said. "It won't hold. We traced it back to a former task force liaison. He won't be here next week." Langston didn't react. Grayson leaned forward. "Michael, I want you to know something. You've changed this place. Not loudly, not politically, but fundamentally." Langston stayed silent. "I used to think the best agents were the ones who won shootouts. Now I think they're the ones who walk through fire without ever raising their voice." A beat. "The final review panel for your promotion meets next week. I think you know where this is going." Langston just nodded once. "I don't want it as a gift," Grayson smiled. "Then it's a correction." That night, Langston left late. Walking past the Langston prep room, the board, the quiet symbols of a shift he never asked for, but embodied. He passed 2 young black agents standing near the elevators. One stiffened instinctively. Langston stopped. "You don't need to flinch," he said gently. The agent blinked. "Sir, you don't need to shrink. Not here, not anywhere." The doors slid open. He stepped inside. And for the first time since the smear hit, he felt lighter, because they'd tried one last time to break him. But you can't break what doesn't need to prove itself anymore. It was raining again. Gate B 14.2 months had passed, but the mist on the glass, the sluggish boarding line, the soft murmur of suitcase wheels, all of it felt the same. Only now, the signs above the gate had changed. Langston stood near the corner, coat folded over his arm, slim leather wallet in hand. Not hidden, just there. As always, he wasn't boarding today. He was meeting someone. Behind him, new posters lined the terminal wall. Government mandated. Subtle but clear. FBI public engagement campaign. Identity, integrity, and access. His image taken from the press briefing wasn't plastered everywhere. But his words were. Small font, upper right corner. You don't end the question of whether you belong. You embody the answer. At the top of the escalator, Director Grayson approached, umbrella tucked beneath his arm. "You always did like quiet symbolism," he said, joining Langston by the window. Langston didn't turn. "Only when it lands." Grayson nodded toward the gate. "I wanted you to see it in person." Langston glanced down. The terminal intercom chimed. "Now boarding. Group 1 for Flight 2237 to Washington, D.C." Langston said nothing, but his jaw set for a second. Full circle. Grayson held out a small envelope. "Section Chief appointment," he said simply. "Signed this morning. It's yours." Langston didn't take it immediately. He looked out again, past the glass, past the gate, past the invisible residue of the moment that started it all. Then he said softly, "How many agents look like me in that position?" Grayson paused. "Before you?" "One, briefly. 2 decades ago." Langston finally took the envelope, slid it into his coat pocket. "I won't be the last." Grayson gave him a half smile. "No, you really won't." As they turned to walk back through the terminal, Langston's phone buzzed. A message from Jamal. "Got the internship letter. They said your reference sealed it. Thank you." Langston replied with just 3 words. "Now walk tall." Outside, the city was waking up. Sirens in the distance, cabs moving slow in rain-slicked streets. And somewhere across the building, a new agent was standing under his own shadow, holding a badge, wondering how to carry it with dignity. Langston had already answered that question. Not in speeches, but in rooms where silence once meant erasure and now meant respect. He stopped at the exit, looked back once. The gate was still boarding. A young black woman, maybe mid-20s, was stepping forward, passport in hand. Sharp blazer, no hesitation. She glanced over her shoulder and caught sight of him. Her eyes widened. She froze. He gave the smallest of nods. Nod permission. Not surprising. Just confirmation. She smiled, straightened, and stepped forward without pause. Later that week, a maintenance worker noticed something curious outside the Langston prep room. No memo had gone out. No announcement had been made, but someone had quietly installed a new floor plaque by the door. A single engraved line: "Don't raise your voice. Rise in your presence. Section Chief M. Langston." And across the bureau, across the city, across screens and whispered stories and hallway glances, that line stayed. Because Langston didn't just win. He shifted the ground dot from confrontation to clarity, from suspicion to stature, from apology to arrival, asterisk.